Coming up, we'll be on location at Biofeedback WORKS in Herndon, Virginia, discussing the latest advances in mental health treatment and how it can help improve your overall mental health, wellness, and life, utilizing biofeedback and neurofeedback. Safe and effective modalities with one of this region's top mental health experts, Dawn Perez. Welcome, Dawn. It's a pleasure having you on our program today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
It's your first time, in fact, on with us. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to hear from a testimonial a bit later, but I wanted to begin, if I may, Dawn, by having you please tell us what biofeedback and neurofeedback are and how they work.
Okay. Both of them are modalities that can help people regulate their parasympathetic nervous system to help with depression, anxiety, and other behaviors or symptoms, we call them. And they are based on positive reward. So someone would come in here for either biofeedback or neurofeedback, and we would give them an experience of what their body or brain is doing and a reward that would directly relate to that and tell their body or brain to repeat that behavior.
Interesting. And what is the difference between neurofeedback and biofeadback?
So neurofeedback, we think of EEG training. So that's your brain waves. Okay, so we use leads and caps, and we actually adhere leads on people's heads to read what the brainwave activity is, because the brain is just an organ of electricity, and that's what we're measuring in the brainwaves, and we measure that in hertz. So that's the like you measure any energy.
Yes.
And biofeedback is, I always say, it's kind of from the neck down. It's putting leads on people's hands and measuring the temperature and body-skin connectivity, which is sweat production, which directly relate to stress and anxiety, and also belts for breathing, and sometimes EMG for tension in the, that kind of leads up into muscles in the muscle tension.
So you really test the whole person. If you think about what you just said, as far as from the brain, which is the neurofeedback, right to the biofeedback, which is the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then what types of problems does this specifically address? And I know you touched on it very briefly a moment ago, but could you please elaborate? Because it's helping a lot of folks around the region, and that's why we're so excited about having you on.
We think that pretty much anything that a person would come to us about having to do with behavioral health, that's our expertise. As I said, anxiety, depression, but also mood regulation, concussions also, which contribute to symptoms such as what I just mentioned. So anything to do with the brain, seizure activity, migraines, any instabilities whatsoever. So all of those things, it could be sometimes autoimmune issues, people with POTS.
And also I understand it helps folks dealing with ADHD issues as well?
Absolutely. Attention and focus, yes.
So it's a lot of folks that actually, between the issues you just mentioned, that have unfortunately these issues and problems that they're dealing with. So it can help a lot of folks out there.
Yes.
And who would you say is a good candidate, Dawn, that could benefit from your modalities that you offer here at Biofeedback WORKS?
Well, almost anyone who's dealing with the stress of today, especially because of COVID. There's a lot of people who are having to manage a lot of different stress than they're used to, and so other things are percolating up, like you mentioned, some focus or attention issues, just isolation, being away from people that they connect with is also creates stability in one's life, and that's not a resource all the time as it used to be. So right now, almost anything in terms of who the person is, a child, we start from age 4 all the way up through adolescence, adults, and up until 80s.
Oh my God, so basically pretty much everyone out there who is dealing with one or more of these issues that are very common in today's society, unfortunately, and has certainly been increased due to the pandemic and all the added stress and anxiety and everything else people are dealing with, could benefit from this.
We also access or utilize databases, and the databases expand from those age brackets also, so that when we're trying to compare when a client comes in what their brain looks like, we are comparing to a database.
So this is more scientifically and technologically driven as far as really measuring and testing potential candidates when they come here to help them and then customize, I would imagine, the right effective treatment to help that particular client. And I would think that makes it a little bit different, certainly, from the traditional options that people are customarily used to going to as far as mental health counseling practitioners and others.
Yeah, unfortunately, most people who've come here have tried all those other things and more. And sometimes, and I certainly believe this, that this is the missing piece, that we aren't looking at the brain activity enough in terms of doing the analysis and healing people from what they're trying to get help for.
Yeah, that's why it's really a very precise approach. It's a deep dive approach from the traditional options that are out there, and that's why it's yielding such great results. And speaking of results, we're actually going to be hearing from one of your clients a bit later who had a teenage son who has greatly benefited from what you offer here after trying all the other traditional options. I also wanted to ask you, Dawn, what the client process is as far as from when they initially contact you and what they go through after that.
So a person will come in usually for a consult, and we'll have a little introduction and exchange information and decide that this is a good placement. At that point, the client will schedule a quantitative electroencephalograph, which is a QEEG, and that is our assessment. And that's a full cap. It is the opportunity to record their brain waves in a record, and from that we create brain maps. And the brain map tells us how their brain differs from a normative group of people who do not have symptoms, do not have what they're experiencing, aren't on any meds, and that becomes our comparison.
Okay, and then you go off of that, which helps you all determine which is the right customized treatment, number of sessions, so on and so forth for each client.
So after the Q, it takes us about a week to analyze all that information. We have them come back, and we get into more of the depths of what their issues are and exchange a little bit more. We actually come up with goals that help define what their treatment plan will be. And the map and what they're saying combined together, how we go about going forward. And then they can start the training.
Okay, that's good to know. And how long are the sessions that take place after that typically take?
So we schedule the sessions as a regular therapist, or, you know, like a 50-minute session is kind of typical. Within that session, 20 to 30 minutes is actual training. And the rest is a check-in and a hookup. I say a hookup because it could be almost anything that we're doing. We have a lot of different choices, but so we fill up that time, but yeah.
And as far as the number of sessions, and I'm sure again that depends probably on each client, right? And what his or her situation is, but generally speaking.
So when somebody comes in, I'm pretty sure and confident in recommending 20 sessions. And at the end of 20 sessions, we do a re-evaluate where we sit down and talk about where we're at and have we met the goals, do we need to continue? And you know, some people have been working through lifelong issues. We can maybe expect that it was going to be more than 20 sessions, but we decide with the client, and everybody agrees at that point to what extent they need to stay here.
And what is the success rate? And again, I'm sure that depends on each client because it really is a partnership, right? Like going to any practitioner, practice, or doctor out there, that really you can guide them and do everything to help them, but they also have to want that guidance and that help. It's working together literally in a partnership to achieve the results that's best for that particular client. So what would you say is typically the success rate you see here at Biofeedback Works?
So, I mean, I could take statistics and I could analyze and say, here, you should feel better. But I hesitate doing that. It's, as you said, it's very important for me to be able to check in with the person, and if we aren't meeting their goals that they've defined, then I don't consider that success. So my expectation is that everybody who walks in the door that become part of our group, we expect changes to take place. They do take place, and how far we go with that is really up to the individual.
Sure.
So I would say I have a 90% chance of everybody finding success, but that could be different depending on the individual. It's a very individualistic approach.
Yes,
no one brain is the same.
Absolutely, just like no two people are alike, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of results, we're now going to hear from Trish, whose son came here at Biofeedback Works. Welcome, Trish. It's a pleasure having you on with us today.
Thank you. Glad to
We
be here.
always appreciate it when folks come down and take a few minutes to share their experiences on our program. And on that note, I understand in your case, you have a 17-year-old son that's been a client here at
Yes.
Biofeedback Works. And I wanted to begin, if I may, Trish, by having you please tell us how that whole process started, from how did you hear about them, and what took place once you came?
Sure. Well, I'm fortunate to have known Dawn through our children being in school together early on, but it had been a while since we'd had this kind of connection. My son, it had been about 5 years since he had gone to a full year of school, depression, anxiety. We'd done all sorts of counseling. He'd done a nature program where he'd walked in the wilderness for 8 weeks. We'd tried everything. And at the point where I reconnected with Dawn and she said, send him to me, it really was a last effort. I didn't know what biofeedback was. Dawn walked us through the process of explaining what it was, how the brain works, how the process might support him, and then we started.
So you had gone through all the more traditionally known options, in other words, to help your son.
We had.
And none of those, unfortunately, were effective or worked. So then you came here, you brought him here to Biofeedback Works, and what happened after that?
Well, first they do a scan. It's called a Q scan, and I will be honest with you, at the point where we got to this point, I asked for enough information to feel like I felt my son was safe. I certainly don't understand. You'll need that information from Dawn. But we went through that process, and she felt that it could help him, and so he started coming once a week. We were able to have him come a couple of times a week just because of our schedules, and it was really fascinating to watch him come home after about 20 sessions or so and to start to see changes.
Oh my
in him.
God. You all must have been very excited and happy to see
And
that.
nervous.
And nervous, right?
Right. For us, it was as if he started going backwards through the phases we had gone through with him over the last 5 years, and to the point where I have my kid back.
Oh, we're so happy.
Sorry, didn't expect to feel emotional, but I don't think it is overstating to say that she really saved my kid. I feel like I have the son back that I had before.
Yes, indeed.
And I think he feels that way too.
Oh, we're so happy to hear that. God bless you all. That's wonderful. And so you basically brought him here. You went through the sessions, and I think you were telling me off camera that he ended up coming here for approximately 45 sessions?
About 45 sessions.
Over a certain period of time.
I think that's pretty standard based on conversations with Dawn that, we started seeing changes around midway of that.
Okay.
And by the end, he really was sort of back to himself, the kid I had always known.
Yes, indeed. And if I may ask, how long was the session typically as far as in time?
A little over an hour.
A little over an hour, okay.
I think.
Okay.
But at the time he was 16, and so at some point he got in the car on his own, and I, I didn't come with him.
Yes, yes indeed. I take it, obviously you're very pleased with the results.
Oh, absolutely.
You have your son back, right?
I do, and I was grateful to hear about this opportunity because everyone in my life is hearing about how great our experience here was, but
Yes.
to be able to spread that information more broadly is a good thing.
Well, I'm certainly happy to hear that. And I wanted to also ask you, Trish, what's your overall experience been like with the staff here at Biofeedback Works?
Oh, incredibly professional. I wasn't sure what to expect when we came here. Everyone is kind, efficient. The whole registration process and making appointments process has been really easy, and all of them have been great to work with.
And again, what I find very interesting is you had tried with your son all the traditional modalities and options, right? Prior to bringing him here to Biofeedback Works, and unfortunately none of those were working or being effective in helping him. And those are some major issues he was dealing with, which means you all were dealing with those. And to have him now the way he always used to be, right? Prior to the depression and the other issues taking over the last couple of years. We are so happy to hear that. And before we let you go, for all the folks out there watching, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Part of the process for us was going through those other things.
Okay.
And I don't know that he would have been ready to come here had we not tried the more traditional methods. You know, so there were points in that process where we saw glimmers. But this was the thing that stuck. This was the thing that really reached in and did whatever needed to be done to rewire his brain to be healthy again.
Yes.
And I encourage anyone who has got challenges going on right now to come talk to Biofeedback Works. I know that at the very least, Dawn will be honest with you about whether this is something that will help you for what you're going through.
Yes, indeed. And as far as having him come back every now and then or periodically, is that something that he does, or?
He hasn't needed to yet, but it is certainly something that we talk about, and he is aware as an option. So we will do that if it's needed.
All right. Well, on that note, we'd like to thank you, Trish, for joining us and enlightening us about the experience you all went through with your son and the great results that he's had here at Biofeedback Works. And on that note, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Our pleasure. We're now back with Dawn. Some very powerful results, Dawn. Trish tried all the other options regarding her teenage son. Unfortunately, none of them worked, and she was really, really so happy and thankful to have brought him here and have her son back, as she just stated.
Well, it's these kinds of experiences that keep us. I have a very experienced team. We're all very dedicated to our clients, and it rewards us to know that we have this ability to walk into somebody's life and change a whole family dynamic, because
That's right.
You know, one individual in the family is not doing so well, so everybody suffers from that, and that keeps us learning more and interested in this, and we see the power of what neurofeedback is, and we really want to spread the word and create an experience where every psychiatrist is using QEEGs to help their clients, or that neurologists are involved in people's behavioral issues. And this really needs to be something that in the field of science, because there's tons of research out there for this, that needs to be appreciated and utilized more often.
Absolutely.
And you can tell by that experience, by that young man, he was lost. And in his particular situation, it was evident why, and we were able to make the adjustments that he needed, and it was a sort of a long-term situation, but it worked for him, and that's the goal.
Yes, indeed, and that's why we have you on today, to help a lot of other folks just like him and many others that are dealing with these types of issues and have unfortunately not had the results or the success by trying the more traditional modalities that people typically take their family to, or they themselves go to. So that's why we have you on. Now, how long does it generally take before your clients start seeing results? And again, I put in the disclaimer that I'm sure that depends on each person. Again, no two people are alike, as we just said a few minutes ago, but generally speaking.
So I have an expectation that I'm going to see some changes at least within 10 sessions. And I'm constantly asking, as any other therapists that are here in the team, you know, every time we see a person, what do you notice that's different? And we expect traction. We expect changes.
Yes.
So, but it doesn't happen immediately for everyone, and it does take some patience sometimes because, as you said, everyone's an individual, and some brains are just very rigid, and they don't want to change, and that's been the
right.
problem. So
It's all the programming that we've had since we were born and came into this world, and you're trying to adjust that or
Exactly.
make it better or more helpful and more programmed in the right direction moving forward, and that's where you hit those walls before you break through those walls with this option.
That's right.
Now, as far as the QEEG assessment goes, I wanted to ask you more specifically how it's used in therapy sessions.
So, as I said, it's a brain map. It's a colorized brain map. We get both surface, which is just what you can read from the surface, and then we get the deep structure mapping as well, called S-Loretta. And we're able to utilize training of both by the kinds of particular protocols that we use. So the Q helps guide and direct us throughout the entire session, and then we may re-cue after a certain number of sessions to make sure that we keep up with the changes that are taking place. So it is not the only thing, because we also need that person's check-in and report every time that they come in to help guide us. But it certainly is the platform for which we keep coming back to for information. And interesting, in neurofeedback, and when I started 15 years ago, we did not that many people were using full QEEGs at the time.
Yes.
So we didn't have this technology available to us. And it makes such a difference now that we have this very high-end, it's the same thing a neurologist would do. And we even send ours out to a neurologist for a review and get the information back as though the person were sitting in his office looking, would be looking at their raw EEG.
Yes, indeed. That's certainly good to know. And you all have a state-of-the-art technologically equipped office here with the latest and greatest, certainly, in helping these folks throughout the region. In fact, you have people coming throughout the region and beyond to you all because of the great results you're achieving and helping your folks with.
Yeah, we try to stay on top of all the new things that are coming out, and it's an industry where there are lots of new ideas and new theories, and even though well researched, new to this community, and so we do try very hard to stay on top of that and do a lot of inner trainings and keep us a bridge of everything.
Now, how do you determine if a client is improving? You mentioned a few minutes ago that generally around 10 sessions in or so you typically start seeing results, and that means you're seeing their improvement taking place.
So we'll be asking them, what are you feeling? We try to sometimes even rate, what level of anxiety do you carry on a regular average? And they'll say, oh, a 7 out of 10. Well, that's pretty high anxiety.
Yes.
And then they'll be reporting maybe a 5. Yeah, I really felt maybe a 5 or 6. Well, that's an improvement from a 7.
That's right.
So this is a very incremental type of way of looking at somebody's progress. So we look for the little things, and we set that up, as I said earlier, in the intake when we get down to the nitty-gritty of what does change in behavior look like. In many cases it can be the broad, I want my anxiety lower, I want to be happier, I don't want the migraine headache. But we have to break that down into little pieces and have a clear understanding of what that looks like. In a child, it could be less outbursts. How many outbursts a week? Well, 5. That's quite a bit. So the mother starts reporting 3 times a week. That's success.
Yes.
So once we know we're heading down the road of doing better, then we know to continue that route.
Yes, because that means that plan, or treatment plan, I should say, that was customized for that particular client of yours is working because you're incrementally seeing the results take place.
Exactly.
Now, how do you assess, Dawn, when you reach that point with each particular client where no additional sessions are necessary?
That's a difficult one, because in my mind, we could go on forever, you know, because there's no
There's so many benefits.
no end to good health, right?
Yes.
But clearly that's not our purpose, and that's not what people's main goals are when they come here. They want to reach a point where they feel whole again and they can go live their lives, and that's when we're all excited when somebody graduates, you know.
Yeah.
So we make those decisions together. Generally, again, we go about this in a certain number of sessions, and then we like to titrate. I call it titrating down from coming in twice a week is the minimum of this really working well. So we encourage people to come in twice a week initially when they're starting, and sometimes more. Some people come for intensives and they come daily.
Sure.
So that's, again, up to the individual. But once we know we've reached the point of stability, so that's whatever that is for that person, then we go to once a week, and then I'd like them to go to twice a month. And then I know that they're confident. They know this isn't a crutch. They know their brain owns what it learned, and they can go away, and we might not see them again, or we might see them during transitions, during hard times in their lives. They may come back for what we call boosters.
Okay. Well, that's certainly good to know as well, that they can come back, like you said, depending on where they are at that point in their lives, that they feel they need to come back. That option is there for them. Now, can a client utilize these different modalities, the bio-neurofeedback modalities that you offer here at Biofeedback Works, if they're on medications? Because we have had that question from folks before.
Right. I don't ask anybody to come off of meds. When we do the assessment, the QEEG, we ask them to not be on a stimulant, because that metabolizes through the body in 24 hours, so that's not really asking a whole lot to not take that morning of the assessment. But they stay on their meds, and if one of their goals may indeed be to titrate or to come down off the amount of meds they're taking, or to come off completely, and we work with people depending on what their goals are in terms of meds. But many times, it's unfortunate, but many times they're on such a regimen of medicine that isn't working for them, and they can't keep taking medicine because that's not, they've maxed out its potential.
Yes.
So there again, that's why they come here, because they're at a point of, what else do I do?
Absolutely.
And that happens with more people than you think, because you think medicine should be fixing the problem.
And it
It's
doesn't
not always.
in most cases. You're right, in a lot of cases. Now, will this therapy that you offer here have any negative symptoms?
So very, very rarely. This neurofeedback itself is a passive therapy, which means that the positive reward is given to the person, and that they're just the vessel or the vehicle. The reward goes to the brain. The brain takes that on. So as a passive therapy, we're able to avoid negative symptoms from the training. And we are also very professional, having the experience working with so many people, that we know if we're getting to the point of doing something that the person might report something that we don't want.
Yes.
And we don't continue it.
Yes.
So I think sometimes people get the impression that this is really dangerous because you're working with my brain, and what are you doing to my head, and really we're reading the brain waves. For the most of all neurofeedback training, we're only reading the brain waves.
That are already there.
Giving a reward back in nanoseconds.
Yes.
To help the brain figure out how to change its behavior.
Yes, indeed. I appreciate you going into that. And now, do these treatments affect our brains or change our thoughts in any shape or form?
We're affecting the brain waves, which we want to affect how that functions in the brain, such as depression. In depression, the brain has a balance, and we want to create the balance that it's supposed to be, and many people's brains aren't balanced that way when they come in. So we are affecting the brain, but not your thoughts. And that is a question I get a lot. And I'm like, your thoughts are your thoughts. And I hopefully will make your thoughts happier.
Absolutely.
But your thinking about things is still something that you need to address in therapy as a therapeutic intervention if you have issues, trauma, lots of therapeutic approaches that need to be dealt with through talk therapy. So I'm still advocate for people carrying through on having that as a therapeutic intervention, even with this,
Yes.
as well as psychiatric, as well as, other
And
things.
you are a therapist, after all, a mental health practitioner. So you bring that expertise and all those years of experience into this, helping folks through the integrated modalities that you offer with bio-neurofeedback, helping so many folks. Now, is there research to back this up, or isn't this experimental?
There is a lot of research that has been done with neurofeedback, and it's available on our website. It's available if you call the office. We can send you out any information that you need. There's been a lot of resources put into getting that resource out into insurance companies. And we have seen over the 15 years I've been in this field, from insurance companies saying no, they won't support or reimburse for any biofeedback codes, to coming a long way and now reimbursing for, it depends on the insurer, but reimbursing for this. So we have a lot of clients who do find success with that because of the research, because the research is valid and it's validated.
Yes,
so
indeed.
That's very important.
No, it's a very highly effective, very accepted modality, and it's helping so many people everywhere as a great option with much more scientific study behind it already, and really a deep dive approach, technologically based, and then customized with the many years of mental health and counseling experience that you and your colleagues provide to really bring the best out in helping that particular client deal with what they're dealing with. And I wanted one last question before I let you go, Dawn, is that I know you touched on it, it depends on the insurance company and the provider. It's becoming more and more accepted even by them to pay for it, but some others still don't reimburse for it. So is that pretty much where we're at?
Yes, and I try to work with people when they come into the office, and if they, they have to pay out of pocket. I totally understand that it is an expensive approach when one is doing that.
Sure.
And
If their provider doesn't pay for it.
Yeah.
So then you obviously, I'm sure, work with each of your clients.
I try to very much. Once you're here, once we know you as a client, we want to adopt the people that need the help that they need. So.
Yes, indeed. And on that note, I want to thank you for joining us, educating us about bio-neurofeedback and how it's helping so many folks throughout the region. And we wanted to thank you for being a guest on our program.
Thank you.
And we'd love to have you back on in the future.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure.